Hi, welcome to Coding Bootcamp's YouTube channel. Subscribe now and join our live stream session later. See you.
Hey, welcome back guys to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. We will be working on our first project for this course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be first covering the recap of the previous sessions and what we have learned thus far. We'll do a quick review and quick refresher of what a REST API is, since in this project we'll be building an application based on it. Afterwards, we will work on our first project, for which we'll be building an application that gets a new record for employees and stores it in our MongoDB database. So thus far, we have covered fundamentals of Node.js. We have learned how we can use a framework called Express to build REST APIs. We also learned how to configure MongoDB and use it to store our data. Right. So in this project, we're going to be creating a simple RESTful API application. So a quick refresher of REST API will be helpful. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is a set of rules that developers follow when they create their API. It's like a contract between front-end and back-end systems to perform the data interchange. So in this project, we're going to be building RESTful API using Node.js and MongoDB. We are creating a simple API that stores personnel records for an accounting department in our company. These are the project requirements. So you must have Node.js installed, and also if you want, you can use Node Version Manager to install or handle multiple versions of Node.js on your local system. Make sure you have an account on MongoDB Atlas. It's always better to set up your database on the MongoDB Atlas rather than on your system. And you can also use a code editor like Visual Studio Code to write your code. So again, the project source code files are on my GitHub. You can download them. You can directly run and see how the program works, or you can just compare with your own code. I would recommend the latter. First, try building it on your own by following the video of what I'll be working on, and then you can just review the code if necessary. All right, so let's begin the project. All right, so this is the project overview. The first thing we need to do is we need to initialize the project. And to do that, we need to create an application folder where our application will reside. To initialize the application, we will have to create a package.json file, which will hold all the metadata for the Node application. This file allows NPM to handle installing the package dependencies and scripts that we will write to handle the application. Assuming you have Node.js installed, let's go ahead and create this file. So I'll just move over to the Visual Studio Code and we'll revisit the slides later. So in my Visual Studio Code editor, I've created a folder and I've opened that folder, blank folder in Visual Studio Code. And in here, I'm going to start a new terminal instance. Make some space here. All right, so the command that we'll be running to initialize the application is npm init. So if you remember, oops, all right, npm init. So if you remember, npm init also has a flag of y, -y, where it will accept the default values. So in our case, I'm really fine with the default values, so I'm just going to select -y so that the package.json gets created quickly, and I'll just press enter. So if you notice, it created a package.json file. If we move to the folder structure, here is the file, and in here we have the default name that has been selected. That is the name of the folder, project 1. We have version 1.0. There is no description because we haven't provided anything, and it assumed that the file that we'll be creating is called index.js, which is fine. We'll create index.js. If you want, you can create a different file with a different name, but we'll be creating index.json file. Then all the other fields are the default values, which we are technically fine. So let's go ahead and create this index.js file before we proceed. I'll just save this. So this is the file that will act like a command central for our application. This file will be executed first by npm when we ask it to run our application. This file will also have the object instances for multiple modules that we'll write, as well as third-party modules that are like dependencies that will be installing from the npm directory. These modules are dependencies for the project, so we'll actually install them right now. So let me expand the terminal and make sure install the dependencies. All right. So let me first type it up and then I'll explain what we are installing. So I'll just say npm, npm install express MongoDB body parser, and I'm going to be using flag of save so that these dependencies are added in my package.json file. I'll just press enter, and if you notice the folder structure, it created a new folder for node modules and it added all the dependencies in here. And if you now look at the package.json file, it added these modules as dependencies since we use the save flag. All right, so they added body parser, Express, and MongoDB. Okay, so what are these dependencies? So Express, like we saw in session 3, Express is a Node.js framework, and MongoDB is the official module provided by MongoDB team to help our Node.js application communicate with MongoDB. Body parser. So this package will allow us to handle request bodies with Express. Okay, so let me give you an example. So let's say you are sending a HTML form data that the user has submitted to the Node.js server. Okay, so you made a request to the server and HTTP sends your form data in bits and pieces, right? That's the HTTP protocol. It sends your data in bits and pieces which are intended to get assembled at the destination. So the destination in this case is your Node application, the Node server. Okay, to extract these bits and pieces of data and assemble it in a format that can be useful, we use body parser middleware. Okay, so let's actually add some code in here. So let's first initialize the objects for these dependencies. So I'll just say const express equals require express. Next thing is we'll do for body parser. Require, oops, I forgot the double quotes here, a mistake. Here we have body parser. All right, for Mongo, we only need Mongo client and object ID. So I'm going to create two separate variables for that. So I'll just say Mongo client equals require MongoDB and the Mongo client. All right, so if you notice, what IntelliSense gives us is the multiple options here. So it gives us Mongo client, Mongo error, Mongo network error, and all the other options here. I'm just going to select Mongo client for now. That's because that's what we need to make the connection. The semicolon, and we will also need to assign object ID and work with object IDs. Okay, so I'll just set object ID equals require MongoDB and object ID. All right, great. So we've added the dependencies. So here we imported all of our downloaded dependencies. Now we initialize the Express framework by utilizing this Express object. So that will be used to start the server. Okay, so first of all, let's initialize this object here. So I will say var app equals express. Oops. Right. Now we need to initiate the body parser with this application, the app object. So I'll just say app.use and use body parser .json. So we want the data in JSON. Okay. You also, if the data is sent on the URL encoded format, so we'll add the use case for that as well. So let me quickly reuse the same code and edit it. And in here, I will say URL encoded and set the extended as true. All right, perfect. Now let's start the server. So I'll just say app.listen. And the first parameter here is the port. So I'll set something for port 5000. I have a callback function and add a console log. I'll say server running at port 5000. All right, typo there. We save this and see if the application is fine. All right, so I think we're good. So here we imported our downloaded dependencies. We initialized the Express framework by utilizing the Express object. This is used to again initialize the body parser as well as start the server. And yeah, that's it. So everything looks fine. So let me go ahead and run this application. So I'll just say node index.js. And it gave us a response. It says server running at port 5000. So looks like we don't have any application errors. So everything seems to work fine. So great. Now let's work on establishing the connection with MongoDB. Okay, so let me again make some space here. Okay. So first of all, we will need the connection string for MongoDB. This can be found in Atlas dashboards. So I hope you created the Atlas dashboard, Atlas instance in session 4. So the string can be found in the Atlas dashboard by choosing clusters and then the overview tab followed by the connect button. We need to add this string to this index.js and make some changes to the code. So let me quickly add the changes. So first of all, let me create variables to set the connection URL as well as the database name. So I'll just say const connection URL equals blank. So I will add the connection URL in a moment. Make sure you get this connection URL from your Atlas instance. Do not copy mine. But the rest of the stuff you can just follow along. So say database name. And the database that we are creating is accounting department. All right, perfect. Now, what we need to do is we need to make this connection with MongoDB, right? For that, we have Mongo client. We imported the Mongo client library. So let me go ahead and add some code here to connect. So I'll just say Mongo client.connect. And the first parameter here is the connection URL. Okay, so make sure you add your connection URL here. I'll be adding in just a moment, but you will use this connection URL as well as later on adding the database name. So let me first add the connection URL. So connection URL, I'll just say second parameter as use the new URL parser. And we'll have the callback function. All right, so here we'll be handling error as well as the client. Save this. All right, so let's first handle the error. So we'll say if there is an error, we'll throw the error.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
All right, great. Now we need to assign the database. We need to assign the database name when this client is connected. Okay, so let me quickly create two variables, one for database and one for collection. You'll see just in a moment how we use this. So we'll say database and collection. These are blank at the moment. Now here, let me set the database with the database name that I'm going to set. So in our case, if you notice, the database name that we have set is accounting department. So I'm just going to reuse this. All right, so once we get the database name, there's a typo here. All right. Now we need to set the collection. Okay, so the collection is personnel. So I'll just say collection equals database dot collection. And in here, I'll just say personnel. Okay, and that's it. Let's log the status out so that we know that we are connected to that specific database. So I'll just say connected to database name plus. All right, so I think this is fine. So let me do one thing. Let me go ahead quickly and get the connection string from my Atlas, and I'll be right back. All right, so I went ahead and added my connection URL. Make sure that the connection URL is for your specific Atlas instance and not mine. We also defined the database name, which we wish to create if not already present, and the collection as well. So we establish a connection once we start again the application and use the globally defined variables. So these two are the globally defined variables, and they can be used in each one of our endpoints. Okay, so let me save this and run this. So I'll just say node index.js. If I expand this, it says that the server is running at port 5000, and it says that connected to accounting department. So it looks like we don't have any error. You can ignore this warning over here. It just says that the server discovery and monitoring engine is being deprecated and will be removed in the future version. So it's fine. We are not worried about that at the moment. All we need to care about is the running of our application on port 5000 and the successful connection to the database. All right, so perfect. Looks like we got a good start. And in the next video, we will actually start building the REST API endpoints. So see you in the next video. All right, now we're going to develop endpoints for creating and querying the data. So let's create an endpoint to add the data. So let me first close the server, make some space here. All right, so before I start the server, I'm going to create my post endpoint to add the data. So I'll just say app.post, and the endpoint that I want to serve on is /personnel. All right, we'll have the request and response. And in here, we are going to insert into the collection. Okay, so we'll be using the collection.insert method and insert the data that we get from the request body. So I'll just say collection.insert, and I will just pass the request body as it is. Since we are using the body parser, that is fine. In here, I'm going to work with error and result. All right, so let's first deal with error. So let's say if there is an error, then we need to throw in an error of 500, or the status of 500. So I'll just respond using status of 500, and I'm going to send the error. All right, and if there is no error, then we'll say response.send and send the result. So before we actually send the result, let's log it out and see what we get. So let me comment this out. If you know exactly what the result is going to be, it's fine. But if you don't know, then make sure you can you log it out first and see if you need to transform the result. So okay, that looks fine. So if you notice, we aren't doing any data validation. But when client makes a post request to this /personnel endpoint, we take the body and insert into our collection, right? So that's what we're doing. Depending on the success or the error response of the database, we return the information back to the client. So we aren't returning yet, but we are logging it out. Let's first save and run this. Let me clear this out. Now, to create this request, to simulate this request, we don't have a front end right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command line utility called curl. So if you're using Linux or Windows, Linux or Mac-based machines, you will have curl installed by default. If you're using Windows, I suggest you use PowerShell and use this command. So I'll just say curl, and I will do a post request. All right. So in here, I will set the headers for this request. I'll say content type of application JSON, and I will pass in the data. So here, first of all, I need to pass in the first name. So let's say the first name is John. The last name is Doe. And all right, looks like everything is fine here. Did I miss any double quotes anywhere? Nope. All right, so let me, okay, there's something wrong here. Let me quickly check this. Sometimes the command line actually throws me an error because it formats it incorrectly. So let me clear this out. All right, so let me do one thing actually. Let me add some space here. All right, great. Now I need to add the URL. So I'll say HTTP localhost, since this is running on my local system, and 5000 and personnel. All right, so what do you think will happen right now? It won't run because our server is not running, right? So what we need to do is we need to, in a different instance, we need to run the server. So we'll say node index.js, make sure that we are connecting to our database. And in the first instance, I'm going to send this data. Okay, so let me press enter, and it should return the success object back to me. All right, so if I move back here, since we have logged the data, so if you notice, it logged it out. That means the record was inserted correctly. So it gave us an object ID as well, and it gave us insert count and the insert IDs. Okay, so let me quickly start the MongoDB Compass and see the data. All right, so I'm going to connect to my Atlas instance, go to the database accounting department, and go to the collection. So the collection is personnel. And if I see here, it created the record. So that's great. So now let's go back. Let's minimize this. And instead of logging it out, we'll just send the response as it is. So if you notice here, there's a result object within the main result object. So if we want to give only this information back to the client, then we can just say result.result. So it will be like this. Save this. And let me quickly go to the curl. And instead of John Doe, let's add Jane Doe. All right, let me see if the node is actually running. Okay, it's running fine. And we press enter. Oh, I need to restart the server, my mistake. It will still give me the console.log for Jane Doe because I didn't restart the server. All right, that's fine. Let's restart the server. Okay, great. And in here, let's add another record. So we have John, Jane. Let's add Joni Doe. We don't really care about the name. So we got a response here. So the response was sent, and here it is. So if I go back to the MongoDB and refresh this, I should have 3 records here. Okay, perfect. So we did the post endpoint correctly. Now let's work on the get endpoint. All right, so let me go back. Let me stop the server so that I don't make the same mistake of when updating the code. All right, let me remove the unnecessary log, keep the code clean. Perfect. Now, after the post, let's set up an get endpoint. So I'll just say app.get personnel request response. All right. Now in here, the first thing we need to do is we need to find. If you notice this is a generic get, so I'm getting all of the records back. Okay. We are not getting any specific records, so we are not looking for Jane or John. Okay. So I'm getting all of them back. So I'll just be saying collection.find, and in here I will be passing in a blank object. Okay, we're passing in a blank object, and I'm going to be adding it to an array. So I'll just say to array, and in here, oops, I made a mistake. All right, in here I'm going to be handling the error in result. All right, first things first, error. If error, then response dot send status of 500, and I'm going to send error as it is. Okay, and if not, then send the result. All right, perfect. Let me save this. So the goal here is to return all the data in our collection representing people. So if you notice that we have no query conditions, that's why we have the empty object here in the find command, and the results will get converted to an array. So let's test this out using the curl, the command line tool that we've been using thus far. And let me go back and first of all start the app.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Application. I'll just say node index, and in the first terminal, I'll clear this out. And what we need to do is, instead of post, we need to use get. So I'll say get HTTP localhost at port 5000, endpoint is personnel. Entered, and I got everything back in an array. So within an array, it's an array of objects, right? So the first thing I got is John Doe, next is Jane, and the third one is Joni Doe. That's perfect. All right, that's good. Now let's say if you wanted to see if you have more records, right? And API consumers, your front-end consumers, they will need to retrieve a single record according to its ID. So how will we do that, right? So instead of using the blank array here, we will use, and also instead of using find, we'll use find1 and pass in the ID, okay? So let's actually reuse this code and alter it a bit. I'm just going to copy it. All right, so at the endpoint, I'm going to be working with ID. Okay, instead of find, I am going to be using find1. Hold on, let me actually replace the whole thing here so that we don't have any confusion. So instead of collection.find, we'll be using collection.find1. And in here, instead of blank object, we'll be passing in the ID. Okay, and here we will actually be looking at the parameters that we'll be sending in. So we need to send the parameter of an ID, and then we get that ID in our application, Node.js application, and then we send it to the MongoDB to look up that ID. Okay, so let me actually clear everything out so there is no confusion. So let me quickly type this up. So we'll say collection.find1. In here, instead of blank object like the last time, what we will do is we will look up by ID. And here I will say new object ID. And in here I will just pass in the request .parameters.id. All right, perfect. So here, now, let me handle the error and result. All right, so first things first, if error, then response.status of 500, send error. Okay, if not, then send the result. All right, perfect. All right, so we are going to use this route parameter to get the specific personal information from MongoDB. So parameters are options. Parameters are options that you can pass with the endpoint, such as specifying the response format or the amount returned, to influence the response. Okay, so this time around we'll be having a route parameter called ID, which will represent the object ID in Mongo database. Okay, using the find1 method, we can get the single record based on the criteria included in the object ID. So ID is not just a string. Okay, so we are converting it into a object type of object ID. Okay, depending on the actual data in our database, we can do the CRUD command. Okay, so let me make sure the application is restarted. Close this out, restart the application, go back to the first terminal, clear this out, and use the curl command. Okay, so we'll say curl get http localhost port 5000 personnel, and now here we need to pass in the object ID. Okay, so we don't know the object ID yet, but in an ideal world we'll be using something called Postman that we'll be covering in the next session. But for now, let's quickly test this out. So let's look up John Doe. So let me quickly copy his object ID. Paste it. I don't need the rest of the information here. I just need the object ID. All right, perfect. So, okay. All right, so I think I made a mistake here. Yeah, okay. Now this query looks fine. The URL is correct, the object ID is correct, and if I press enter, it returns the record for John Doe. So great. Now that we have completed it, we have built a RESTful API with get and post endpoints. So now if you want, you can add more endpoints to this. You can add update or delete. Okay, so I will leave that up to you to add these two endpoints. That will be like your homework exercise. But what we have learned thus far is to develop a custom API and connect it with MongoDB to fetch and manipulate the data. So you can also improve upon the API security and scalability. If you go back to the PowerPoint slides, you'll find resources for best practices. And you can also implement the same project, the same node application project with a different database. Okay. So that's it. We have completed project 1, and I will see you in project 2, in where we will be covering the user authentication system using Node.js and MongoDB, in which you will actually be working with best practices, and also will be using with a tool called Postman. All right, so I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. And in this session, I'm going to be covering project 2 of this course. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in the session outline, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cover a recap of previous project, and later on we will discuss what a user authentication system is and how we may proceed on how to build a user authentication system. So in the previous project, we covered how to create basic REST API endpoints and connect them, connect the application, the Node application, to the MongoDB, and add in the personnel records for our accounting department. We were adding the records as well as updating those records. Okay, so we did the create and read. So it's your task to add the additional functionality like updating of the records as well as deletion of the records. So that way you will have a complete CRUD application. Now moving on to this project, we are going to be covering user authentication system. So what is a user authentication system? You may have actually used this yourself. It is a way to get access to the products and services that you want to use. So for example, if you regularly use Amazon.com to get your products, you have a username and password. That is a user authentication system that Amazon has built to protect the identity of its customers and to keep a track of their orders. Okay, so you enter in some credentials and then you can access your account. Same way, it has been used on various products and services. Some of the products and services require you to have multi-factor authentication, like banks. in case of banks, you will always have a multi-factor authentication. Like for example, if you enter username and password, they will again send you an SMS, or you will have an authenticator app where you need to enter in your code. So that is a bit advanced level of security that they provide. But for today's project, we are going to be focusing on the very simplest version, that is using the email and password. Okay, some of the companies use username as well. Usernames are unique IDs that they maintain in their system. We are not going to be covering those, but it is I strongly urge you actually that you create unique IDs in your database, in your Mongoose database, and you check against that. You can use the same principles that we are using in this project, and you can expand on top of it by using unique IDs as well as multi-factor authentication. Okay, so let's move on to the requirements of the project. So the first thing is you must have the Node.js and the MongoDB Atlas installed. Okay, so MongoDB Atlas has to be set up, not installed. You need to have Node.js installed. If you want to use, you can use Node Version Manager to handle multiple versions of Node, and you need to have a code editor like Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text. Okay, so the scope of the project, like I mentioned before, is very simple. We are allowing users to sign up and log in using simple email and password. Again, it is my recommendation that you build on top of this and build it into a more complex application. So the source code of this project is available on my GitHub. You can download it, you can use it, you can even expand on top of it. I'm completely fine with it. If you want, you can just send me a pull request and I will check what you have done. All right, so this is the project overview. If you notice the first 3 points, we already followed the same steps for the previous project, and we're going to be following the same steps for this project as well. Starting from point 4, 5, and 6, we'll be covering user authentication system in detail. So let's begin the project. I'll be moving on to the coding side of this session, and we will get back to the PowerPoint slides in just a bit. So I'll begin by creating a new folder, and I'm going to call this as project 2, and I'll be opening this up in Visual Studio Code. Alright, and I'm going to be opening up a new terminal instance. Okay, looks like the Visual Studio Code got updated. Alright, in here we're going to be initializing the project. Do you remember the command to initialize the project? It is npm init. So I'll say npm init, and I'm going to be accepting the default value, so I'll just say flag y. Okay, it says invalid. Okay, so I cannot give this name. Alright, so let me just say npm init project 2. This naming convention is fine. Alright, so if I look now, I will have a package.json file created. Perfect. Now let's install the dependencies. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is we are going to be installing Express, Mongoose, bcrypt, body parser, course, and .env. I'll explain all of these libraries in detail as we start coding, but let me go ahead and quickly install this. Make sure you install this at this moment itself. So I'll just say npm install -- save and the dependencies. So I'll say Express, Mongoose, course, body parser, and bcrypt. Let this install, and in the meanwhile, what I need to do is okay, it's done. That's perfect. I need to create a main file that will run. So I'll just call this server.js, and inside of this, we'll start by declaring the variables for all of these dependencies that we just installed. So the first thing is obviously the Express instance. I'll say require. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
the course, the body parser, the mongoose. So I'll say and mongoose. We have one for body parser as well. All right, perfect. Now let's establish the MongoDB connection first before we do anything, because that's more important, right? So let's now here in this case, I'm going to be connecting to the MongoDB using Mongoose. Mongoose is a library that allows us to create models for the database. Okay, so we're going to be diving deep into this library as we start coding. But let me just quickly go ahead and make a connection. So to make a connection, all you have to do is follow this following way. So first thing is you do mongoose.connect and you pass in the URL, and then you pass in the parameters that you want to pass in. So I'm going to just passing in the URL. So I'll just say mongoose.connect. Here I will have the MongoDB URL, and the URL I'll be passing in the parameters to make sure that MongoDB accepts the new URL, right? So I'll just say URL new URL parser as true. All right, I'm going to save this, and after this we have to initialize the express. So let's do that real quick. I'll say constant app equals express. So I created an instance, and let's make sure we use the body parser. So we'll say app.use, and we'll say body parser.json. It's the same as what we did last time. And here I will just say URL encoded as well, right? And here we pass in an object of extended true. All right, perfect. Now let me write up the code for the server. So I'll say constant server equals app.listen, and in here I'm going to be passing in 3000 callback function. Say listening on port 3000. All right, perfect. Oops. All right. Now this will throw an error because we don't have a URL, but I'm just going to make sure I have the URL and run this. And let me do that real quick. All right, so I added the MongoDB URL here, and now let's go ahead and run this code and see if this works. So I'm going to select new terminal, and I'm going to run this application, NodeService.js, and it says listening on port 3000. So the server is running. You can ignore this warning. This is from the Mongo client. It's not urgent right now, so we won't be addressing it. It's a deprecation warning for some of the libraries or some of the ways that they handle the connections. Okay, so this works. So now let's quickly review this code on what is happening here. Okay, so the first of all is we have added the Express instance. We already covered this in the previous session. We also covered the body parser in the previous session. The two new things in this particular file are the course as well as Mongoose. Okay, so we haven't made use of course yet. Course is actually cross-origin resource sharing. It is a mechanism that allows restricted resources on a web page to be requested from another domain that is outside of that domain from where it was first served. Okay, so we'll be talking about this in just a moment. But Mongoose. So Mongoose is a ODM. That's the modeling library that we use to create database for MongoDB. So it provides a schema-based solution to model our application data. It has some pre-built functionality like validation, building queries, building logic hooks. So it is quite simple to work with MongoDB using this Mongoose library. And we'll also be using this to create the model, like I said. So let's go ahead and create this model. So what I will do is I will create a folder here, say models. Oops. And in here, I'm going to create a file called user.js. Okay. Now in here, the first thing we need to do is we need to declare mongoose again. So I'll say constant mongoose equals require. All right. Now the user schema is we get a schema method that allows us to pass in an object that is defined as a user, that is defined as a schema. Okay. So let me quickly write this up and then explain it to you. So I'll say constant user schema equals mongoose.schema, and inside here we'll pass in an object. Okay, so the two things that we need to define this particular user is email and password. You can add a username, you can add first name, last name, telephone number, and all those sorts of things. But for authentication, we are only concerned with username or the email and the password. Okay, so I'm going to be just adding username and password. So I will say email, that will be an object. This will be of, oops, type string, and we want email to be completely lowercase. We don't want any of the characters in uppercase. Okay, so I'll say lowercase equals true. Then we want this to be unique. So if somebody enters the same URL again, we will tell them that you already have an account with us. Please sign in instead of signing up, so that we don't have multiple records that we again, we don't have to deal with multiple records. This is required. Both of these are actually required, so we'll say required as true, and we can give in a method. We can say can't be blank. All right. Then we'll say, is this the index? Yeah, we want this to be the index for the index for searching. We'll say true. All right, perfect. Now we'll declare for password. So we'll have another object for password. This will again be a type of string. Required, yes, definitely. We'll say true. Cannot, we'll say can't be blank. All right, and we'll have a minimum length for the password. Usually password has a password policy of its own. You can define a password policy as you like, but I'm going to just say minimum length is of 6, and that's it. All right, perfect. And now what we want to do is we want to export the schema. So the way we export the schema is this is a module in itself. So we'll use module.exports, and they will export this this as a MongoDB model. Okay, so export this as a Mongoose model. So what we'll say is we'll say module.exports equals mongoose.model, and in here you need to pass in the name. What name we want to use it outside of this particular file, this model. What will be the name of this model? It will be user, and we'll be passing in the schema. We'll say user schema. All right, perfect. take a note of this, we haven't added any sort of data validation. We are not storing password. We're not encrypting the password just yet. We have added the bcrypt library that will allow us to encrypt the password, but we're going to test this first of all to see if it works. Once it works, then we can work on encrypting the password and making sure that the password exists or not, comparing the existing password. All right, so let's now go back to the servers.js file. And in here, what I will do is I will create a new user. Okay, so the user sign up. So let's quickly write a endpoint for user sign up. We'll say app post, and we'll say v1/user. The reason I'm adding this v1 is because we want this to be version 1. As we add more stuff to it, we can change the versions. Okay, so this can be your versioning policy. Make sure what functionality was provided in version 1, what functionality was provided in version 2, and so on. Okay, so I'll just say user sign up. All right, now we'll again have request and response like we did. Now in here, I need to create an instance of a user. Okay, so first of all, what we need to do is we need to import the model that we just created in this models folder that was named user. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get this. So we'll say constant user equals require, and since this is in the local directory, I'm going to use the relative path. So I'll just say period. That's the home directory. Inside of this, go into models. So it popped up, the option showed up. The Visual Studio Code gave me options, so we'll go into the models, and we need the user file. All right, perfect. We'll save this, and now we need to create an instance for this user, and that's what I'm going to do here inside of this method. Okay, so I'll say constant user equals a new user. Okay, and inside of this, what are the two things that are required? Email and password, right? That's what we have defined. So in here, we'll create an object. We'll say email, and now we're getting this from request and response, right? So we'll be getting this within request. So I will say request.body.email, and the same for password. All right, perfect. Now in MongoDB, we had the same method. Same way for this particular, for Mongoose as well, we have the same method. So I'll just say save, and it will either respond using error or a response. So I'll say error or response. All right, so again, like always, let's handle the error first. If it's an error, then we'll respond using response.status as 400, and we'll send the error as it is. And if it's not the error, then we'll say response.status as 200 and send the response. All right, let's save this. Oh, I misspelled this. Okay. All right, save this real quick. And now, how do we run this? Okay, so in the previous application, we used a command line utility called curl to test our user endpoints or API endpoints. But in this case, this is a bit more complicated. As we build on the system, we'll add more code, we'll add more endpoints, and these parameters will increase. Okay, so consider this. Right now, you're just sending email and password. What if you were actually collecting the username, the user first name, last name, the address, and all the other details, right? So it will be harder for using curl to send all this information. what we can do is we can use a tool called Postman. Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. In this session, we'll be covering Project 3. So in the Project 3, we'll be building the same user authentication system that we built in Project 1, but instead of using MongoDB, we'll explore some other different databases. So I've chosen specifically MySQL because the relational database systems are used quite often in the industry. Okay, so you need to understand how to use your Node.js application that you're building with these relational databases. So in this session, we'll be covering the same concepts we covered in the previous session, that's the Project 2, but we'll understand how things work differently specifically for relational databases. So user authentication system. So we talked about this. So what is user authentication system? It is a way of authenticating the users in order to give them access to your website or your web application. Okay, so there are various ways you can give the user access to the system. One of the most common ways is by using username and password. There are a few other options which I told you to explore in the previous session. I hope you did. But if you didn't, you can always explore them in this session as well. And those options are by using a multi-factor authentication or using a much more complex user authentication system that is being provided by the third-party systems like Auth0 or AWS Cognito. Okay. So in this project, we'll be covering Node.js and SQL. The requirements are, of course, you need to have Node installed. You can use Node Version Manager to install. And the next thing is you need to have MySQL installed. Okay, so the instructions are pretty straightforward. If you go to this particular link that I have added, it's on mysql.com/downloads, where you can just download the SQL version specific to your machine and get it configured according to the documentation. I'm not going to cover that in this session, the installation of that system, because the documentation is very straightforward. Instead, what I would like to do is I'd like to show you what I have already in my local system. Okay. The other SQL databases that you can use are PostgreSQL, SQLite, Microsoft SQL Server, MariaDB, Apache CouchDB, SAP HANA. So I'm choosing MySQL for a very specific reason. It's easy to get started. If you use any of these systems, the same concepts will apply as well. All right, so again, the scope is pretty much similar to the project that we worked on previously. We'll allow users to sign up and log in. The source code files are available on my GitHub page, where you can download and inspect. So without further ado, let's begin working on this project. So we'll have to initialize the project, and we'll have to create a folder like we did for the last project. So I'll just go in here and my mistake, and I'll just create a folder called Project 3 and open this up in Visual Studio Code. And in here, I'm going to open up the terminal and do an npm init. I'm going to select all the default values except for the entry point. I'm going to name my application as app.js. Other than that, I'm fine with the default values. So it created a package.json. All right, so now we have to move ahead and install all the dependencies. So these are the dependencies that we are going to install. We'll install the ExpressJS module. That's the Node.js framework that we worked on in the last project. We'll also install the MySQL driver. This is the module that helps our Node.js application to interact with the MySQL server. And of course, we'll install the body parser to handle the request bodies within the Express. But before you do any of this, make sure you have MySQL installed and you have a database created with a table for accounts. Okay, so let me go ahead and clear this out and log into MySQL. Okay, so I have installed MySQL on the system and I have created a database, a default database of Coding Bootcamp. Okay, so I'm just going to log in into it as root. All right, so I've logged into MySQL and I'm going to create a table in here called accounts. So I have the query prepared for creating a table. I'm just going to copy it and paste it. So in here I'm doing create table if table does not exist, and I'm followed by the table name, that is accounts, and I'm defining a account ID that it will be the primary key that will auto increment, and I've set this as of type integer. I've created two another fields that we need, that is email and the password, and they both should not be null. Okay, so I'm just going to press enter and it created the table. Okay, make sure you do all of this before installing the packages for MySQL. All right, so now let's go ahead and install these packages. I'm just going to get out of the MySQL command prompt, and in here I'm going to install the npm dependency. So I'll just say npm install -- save express MySQL and body parser. All right, I'm going to let it install and I'll see you in just a bit. All right, so the dependencies were installed. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called app.js, since that's the main source file that I want to run when I run this application. And in here, I'm going to declare the variables for MySQL as well as express and body parser. So you know how to do that. It's the same way as we did for the last project. So express equals require express. I'm just going to copy this to save some time and reuse this. All right, change this to MySQL. And this for the body parser. I'm going to actually follow the camel casing here. All right, perfect. So now that we have initialized all of the dependencies, let us create a connection to the database. So I'll just say var connection equals MySQL dot connection. Or actually dot create connection, my mistake. We'll use dot create connection, and within we'll insert the parameters for host, user, password, and the database. Okay, so the host is a local host. The SQL server is running on my local system, so it'll be localhost. So I'll say host is localhost, user is root. It's the same configuration I'm using, which you previously saw when I logged into the MySQL database. Okay, so password I've set as password. All right, and database that I want to connect is coding bootcamp. All right, perfect. Now let's initialize the Express application. So we'll say constant app equals express, and we'll we'll initialize the body parser. So app.use, we'll say body parser.json. Let me reuse this. So I'll say, instead of JSON, I'll say URL encoded, extended, true. All right, perfect. Now we have to start the server and make sure everything is fine. So let me go ahead and create a server. App.listen. Here I will start on server at port 3000. Have a callback function, and we'll say console log. All right, perfect. So let me just quickly verify everything is in order and that we haven't missed anything. We have just declared the connection string, but we haven't made a connection to the database yet, which is fine. Do that in a moment here. So let me save this, and let me see if the code that we have written thus far is fine. Right, it says server started at port 3000, so that's perfect. Now let's write the code to add users into our database. So let's write the code and endpoint for the sign up flow. All right, so let me quickly make some space here and create an endpoint for the sign up. So I'll say app.post. Since this is v1, I'll just say version 1. This can always be improved, so I'm using the versioning system within the URL itself. So user sign up, and in here we'll have request and response. All right, so let's get the email first. So I'll say var email equals request dot body dot email, and I'll use the same for the password. All right, I need to make sure that both of these values come through. So I'll just add a check if email and password are not empty, then we'll make sure that we use the connection string that we have and query into it to add the values. So we'll say insert into accounts, and what we're inserting email and password. So remember that when we created the table inside the MySQL, we also created two columns for email and password, and that's what we're using it again. Okay, so you have to make sure that you have the MySQL running, and also you have created the table with the specific column names. Okay, all right, moving on. So we'll just add values, and I will say question mark, and in here we'll add it as an object. Okay, the object is email and password. All right, perfect. Okay, it's not an object. I think I have to use square brackets here. Yeah, you had to use square brackets here. Okay, so we'll deal with the error.
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
Results. And we'll handle the error first. So we'll say if error I don't know why it added a new line. Let me fix that. We'll say response.status is of, let's say, 400, and we'll send just the error. All right. Else we'll say response.status of 200 and send user account created. All right, perfect. Now what happens if the user fails to enter username or password? Let's say if one of the field is blank. We already added the if statement, and we can just add the error handling here. So I will add a else block, and in here I'm going to say response.send, please enter username and password. All right, and I'm going to end the response. And I also, I think, need to end the response here. Yep. All right, perfect. So I think this looks fine. We'll use the postman to create the new user. Okay, I need to first restart this, and I'm going to switch to postman to create a new user. Alright, so I've opened up the postman and I've entered the URL. Within the body, I've added email and password. Okay, now let me do one thing. Let me send this. Okay, the server has been stopped. Let me start the server again. Let me send this, and it gives me a 500 internal error. So it says cannot read property of email. Okay, so this is a body parser problem. Let me go here. Okay, so body parser is correct. Okay, request require express. I don't think we need request. I don't know why I added that. Oh, okay. So yeah, okay, we made a mistake here. It's request. It's this request right here, not the request module. Okay, let me save this and restart it. Go back, and it says please enter username and password. Okay, so let's add the raw data right here. So we'll say, or let's use this form URL encoded. So we'll say email and password and send it. All right, it says user account created. Okay, so that's fine. Now how do we check if the user account was actually created? So let me create a new terminal instance and log into MySQL. And within the accounts table, Let me see if that was added. Oh, select star from accounts. Okay, I'm missing this star. Sorry, the from. All right, so it added the account ID and the email and the password. All right, so that's perfect. Now we have completed the sign up process. I will have to write code for the login process. All right, let me make some space here. And it's the same way as we did in the last session. So I'm going to create another endpoint, v1/user/login, and I'm going to reuse some of this material right here. All right, within here again we need the email and the password, so I'm just going to reuse this. Okay, and like before, I'm going to check if both values were actually provided. And in here, now I need to look up the database, right? So I'll just say connection.query, and in here I'm going to write the query. So I'll just say select star from accounts where email and password are of the given value. Okay, so I'll just say where email equals question mark and password equals question mark, and pass in the email and password. All right, and then we need to handle the error and results. So let's say function error results. All right, perfect. Now let's handle the results right here. So let's say if we get results dot length of greater than 0, then we will send in the status of 200. So we'll say response dot status of 200, send user logged in. Okay, else we are going to send incorrect email and or password. So we'll say else response dot send, oops, incorrect email or password. I need to send the status to, I missed the status of say 400, not 500, because it's not a server error, it's the authentication error. All right, perfect. I need to end the response, and I need to add a else statement for this if block. So let me write a if, sorry, remember the else statement. So I'll say response.send, please enter username and password, and end the response. All right, perfect. I think that is it. Let me see if everything is in order. All right, it looks fine. Let me switch back and restart the server. Okay. Let me reuse the same thing. I'll just duplicate this tab, and instead of sign up, we'll use login. Let's check with the correct values first. It says user logged in. What if I change something? What if I make some mistake here? So let's say if I say password 12, it says incorrect email / password. If I miss out on the password, it says please enter username and password. So whatever checks that we have added in here within the if and else block are correct. Okay, so perfect. That was the user authentication application that we wanted to build using ExpressJS and MySQL. So that is it. We covered the sign up as well as the login aspect of it. You can use the environment variables to define port and connection URL, and use Swagger to document your API like we discussed in the last session. So that actually covers our Node.js project in detail. You can use different databases if you want, not just MySQL. And I encourage you to use different databases and work with multi-factor authentication as well. Try to implement multi-factor authentication in your system. So I hope this gives a good introductory vantage point for you, where you can now navigate through the path of your learning and make sure that you master Node.js quickly. All right, so thank you for staying with me. Take care. Bye-bye.